Hello and welcome to Level Up Your English with Kathleen Elise. So this is this second streaming of our eighth live. So congratulations for making it this far, and thank you for joining me all this time. So today what we're going to talk about is the four finer points of developing fabulous English pronunciation. So, if you before we start, just make sure that you introduce yourself in the chat and tell me where you're joining from and what your native language is. And I'm going to say this probably every single live because somebody's going to be new every time. So, the reason I ask you for your native language is that it helps me to understand the culture that you're coming from, therefore, how you would interpret many things that in English, and therefore, how to explain the English speaking side of it to you, the cultural side of it to you in terms that you would recognize and that you could associate, therefore remember. And also it helps me with the how you produce your sounds in your language. Having that understanding helps me to be able to explain how to produce the sounds of English in a way that again you're going to have reference to and you're going to be able to connect with. So it makes it easier for you when you're learning English. So you don't have to, it just helps me out if you feel like doing all those things. So don't forget to mark your calendars because this happens every Monday, twice a day. So it happens at the absolute beginning of the day at 12 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, which is midnight Eastern time, and then 12 hours later at noon, like we're doing it today, Eastern time. That way, everyone around the world can have a really good chance of joining in the lives and getting your questions answered from me right now live. So there we go. That's the housekeeping out of the way. Now, I am going to do my best to keep this to within 30 minutes. I am giving myself I've allotted an hour for this time, but I know I'm trying to have this so that you can join on your lunch break or while you're commuting, and I don't want to take up all of your time because I've done decades of commuting back and forth, and sometimes you just need a break and you just need your brain to go blank. But if you don't, this is a great thing to do in that interim time. But I still want to give you some downtime as well. So anyway, all right. So today, again, I'm going to give you the four finer points of developing fabulous English pronunciation. So the live this morning went. It's about 40 minutes and it's really good information. And I try to cover the same basic stuff on each one, but it is going to be different because it is live. So, this morning I felt really discombobulated and kind of fractured and not necessarily as coherent as I would have liked. So I think I'm going to adjust this a little differently. So right now I'm going to give you the 4 points and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to go into detail. I just don't want you to miss the flow of what the points are because I'm not sure if I did that this morning. So first of all, of the point number 1 is you want to listen first. Listen, listen, listen. The second thing is that you want to watch what people are doing with their mouths. What did they have to do in order to produce the sounds that you're hearing? You've listened now, so now you have to figure out what are they doing to make that sound. This third thing that you want to do is then you want to put those two together and do your best to form your mouth and do whatever you have to do with your tongue and your voice in order to practice reproducing those sounds, okay? And you wanna get them accurately, all right? Um, and that whole exercise, step number 3, is to get your brain and your mouth, your muscles all working together so that, when it comes to thinking in English, you don't have to put so much energy into it because you will have put the work in ahead of time to really practice it and, you're essentially training for your fluency here. It's just like going to the gym, only it can be more fun. I'm torn between the gym and not. I don't mind going to the gym, and sometimes it's super great for your clearing out your brain and just, that physical workout takes out a lot of stress, so it's great. I don't always do it, so, um, but it's like a workout for your brain and um, your muscles. Your speaking muscles, okay? And we'll go over that. And then the 4th thing you wanna do is to record yourself. So and you wanna do it in a video, but you also wanna do it just with the audio. Just, take out your phone and just use your voice recorder and record yourself. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this, which I'll get into. But the reason you wanna do this is so that you can hear yourself and see yourself as the listener would, okay? And that's important because when you're just talking, everything sounds great to you, even if you're embarrassed, even if you know that there's more work to do. You always think, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's good. I know what I'm doing, that sounds right." That's not always the case, however. So, by recording the video, you can see yourself and you can see, am I doing what that person, that native speaker just did with their mouth, and therefore, am I getting that same sound? If you're not, you can see it, and then you can make adjustments for it. So and then when you're listening, just listening, when you've just recorded your voice, you can listen as the person that you're speaking to would be hearing you, or you can hear it as they would hear it, and you can say, "Ooh, maybe that's not I didn't even understand what I was saying in English, so I think I need to work on that." Or you'll come out with, "Oh, that was better than I thought. I still need to work on it, but that's much better." Or, "Wow, I nailed it. I got that." So, it's a super valuable exercise. Make sure you record yourself. And so again, I'll get into that in a minute, all the details of that. So, listening, step number 1, back to step number 1, listen first. And the reason that you wanna do this is so many students of English, or actually any language, I've done this in the languages that I've tried to learn. You think that reading and speaking are happen at the same time. They don't. For millennia, we didn't have written language. We developed a language. I forget, I this is just a generalization, but sometime around, when I don't know my eras, I'm terrible with specifics on history and geography and all that stuff. Um, but back, the time of the Egyptians building the pyramids, and even further back, people had to develop a system of symbols, and it started out usually to keep track of food supplies for the community and different things like that. So at some point, we did develop a system of putting symbols down either in stone or on paper or in the sand, whatever it happened to be, that would allow people to keep track of information, All right. But before that, everything was through your voice, everything was sounds. So when you're learning a language, even your native language, you didn't come out of the womb writing what you wanted speaking, okay? You didn't have any of that. The first thing you learn, and you take, human beings take about 5 or 6 years before we ever learn to write as a whole in general. And so 5 or 6 years. Well, many language students or foreign language students expect themselves to be able to do all of that at once. And we don't give ourselves enough time to focus on the sounds and getting the sounds right. Each of the sounds I'm making represents a certain thing. Now, when we string different sounds together in a certain way, culturally, using the cultural understandings of what the sounds and the patterns and the rhythms and the emphasis mean, okay? The intonation, the inflection, all of those things are dealing with sounds, not letters. Listen, so take the time. Forget your alphabet, your native alphabet, forget the English alphabet, and focus on the sounds that you hear. And focus on, first of all, reproducing those sounds. So that's what speaking is about. Pronunciation is about reproducing the sounds that one particular community or culture has agreed upon, um, to represent specific things. All right. And they've agreed upon the patterns, they've agreed upon all the different things that go into the sounds of the language. So it's super important if you want to get anywhere and get better with your pronunciation and becoming more fluent, focus on the sounds. Okay. I know people who have been in America, the United States of America for, 25, 30, 80 years, and their pronunciation never gets better because they're not focusing on the sounds. They're thinking, well, good enough is good enough. I, you know, I don't want to go any further. So it's really a matter of, what do you feel that you need in order to communicate clearly and effectively in English? So, um, do you want to settle for just good enough? Or do you want to really improve so that you can communicate with more people and be more effective in communicating your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, in the best way possible for you? Um, so it depends on what your dream for learning the language is. So don't ever discount your dream of, what is it that you want English to do for you? And if you don't need it or want it to do more than just getting by, then that's fine because that's what you need at the time. But if you want to be able to, get a promotion or work in a certain industry or at a certain level, you're probably going to need to elevate your English, to level up your English, starting with your pronunciation. Okay. So, um, and when you're listening to sounds, when you're getting the sounds down, you want to listen to the sounds of English from different English speaking cultures and different sources, because not all of your English speaking, not all of your examples out there are going to be accurate, or they're not they're not going to be correct, because and I think the reason this was so important for me to do this particular topic today was because I've been coming across a lot of English teachers who are not native speakers, who have learned from either from people who misunderstood what the word was, and so when they taught it or when they learned it incorrectly, and now they're teaching it incorrectly because they misunderstood it to begin with, or they learned it from someone who doesn't have a general accent, someone who has a very specific English speaking accent because of where they came from. I've told the story of my friend who had a new neighbor who was from deep in the state of Alabama, which in the United States is in the South, um, almost at the bottom of the country. It probably is at the bottom of the country. Um, and her accent was so heavy that even I couldn't understand. I misunderstood the words she was talking about. And so she was trying to say the name of a store that she and my friend worked at, JC Penney, Penny, and she ended up pronouncing it as if it was a flower, a peony. And even the way I'm saying it is much clearer, a 200% clearer than she was pronouncing it. So it makes a difference. I thought they met at a flower shop when they met at a clothing store. So, um, so it makes a big difference. And not that she's wrong. In her community in the southern states, she would be easily understood. But to the rest of the English speaking community, around the world, people would think that she was talking about a flower, and so her message wouldn't get communicated properly. And so the whole point of learning a language, the whole point of language itself is to communicate ideas and thoughts and messages and feelings from one person or being to another. So animals have their own method and means of communication. They can't communicate ideas, but they can give warnings. You know, they can be aggressive and say, "Hey, back off. Don't you're not gonna wanna mess with me." So they have their ways of saying that. We have it too, but we can go deeper with that. And so you want to make sure that your pronunciation is clear. Again, get your sounds from all different English speaking communities. Canada speaks differently, that you can tell when someone is from Canada versus the United States. Within the United States, you can tell someone who's from Montana or someone who's from California or Texas. You can tell where they're from by the sounds that they make. So, in Australia and New Zealand, and I'll show you an example from that later on. Um, so the sounds are important, and I'm really focusing heavily on this first step because they're that important. If you're mispronouncing your words, many times, many of the examples I'm going to give, the way they're being mispronounced, it's not a word in English. It certainly not in the general sphere of English. Again, one of the examples is an example from a very specific area in the world of English, but it's not common, and so most people wouldn't understand you. Um, so really spend a lot of time listening. Listen to the sounds. Then, like I said, spend time with videos, spend time talking to native speakers. If you're in the grocery store, you can say, depending on where you are, some people are much more friendly than others, but most people will understand if you say, you know, if you just say, "Hello, how are you? I'm learning English. Would you mind talking to me?" Or something on that idea. People will understand, and many people will be happy to talk with you. So listen, listen to all the sounds, spend the time. Okay. So, and then watch. And again, even as I'm talking, you can see what my mouth is doing. Um, Actually, that helps. Sorry. I still had it on the night vision, the screen brightness. So I apologize. So watch what people do with their mouths. Again, I'm learning Korean, and so I'm gonna just take those off because the glare is driving me crazy. I'm learning Korean, and the Korean way of making the sounds that they need for their language is different, very different, almost opposite of the sounds, the way that things that I need to do with my mouth to speak my language. And so I'm finding this a challenge. I'm getting better though, but I have to spend a lot of time watching how the native Korean teachers what they do with their word, what they do with their mouth. Their, um, their mouth is much more relaxed than in English, and I say this a lot, again, because it's really important. Their mouth is more relaxed and things are a wider, the mouth is a wider shape, and some of the teachers seem to almost talk almost with their teeth clenched in order to produce the sounds, and so that's taking me a lot of practice to get my jaw to do that, to get my jaw to relax, because in English, everything is more elongated and our tongues are very active versus more relaxed is in Korean sounds. Um, so there's everything in the way we pronounce things has to be tense and ready to move. Lots of short, quick movements, short, quick sounds, a staccato, to use a musical term. And the tongue doesn't really rest when we're speaking English. And that can be difficult if you're coming from a culture where your tongue doesn't move around a lot. So, again, the reason I say practice, watch, and then the next step is to practice because it's hard and when you do the work ahead of time and you put the effort in ahead of time, when it comes to your having to enter into a conversation in English, your brain and your mouth won't have to think about what to do. You'll automatically be thinking in English because you will have been familiar with the sounds. So your brain will automatically say, oh, English, mouth and tongue and vocal cords, you need to do this. So you'll eliminate that problem of thinking in your language while trying to speak in English. And when you do that, when you think in your language and try to speak in English, you produce words that don't mean anything or they're unclear, and it takes the listener a lot of effort to figure out what you're saying. So that's definitely something that is all part of communication. Again, the point is to get the message across, and if the person in front of you who's listening to you has to put a lot of work into trying to figure out what you're saying, your communication is not effective, and people aren't gonna wanna communicate with you because they won't it'll just be too much work. So, again, if you're in the business world or if you need help, um, or if you're trying to learn how to drive or, be given instructions and you have to give feedback, people aren't going to want to work with you and you're not going to be seen as the highly competent person that you are. Just because you can't communicate in one language doesn't mean that you're not, smart and capable and creative in your own language. So you want to take that whole everything you've worked for in your own language, you want to be able to communicate that not just in words, but in the whole presentation in the new language, in English. Okay, so let me just get to some examples here. And again, so we did go over recording yourself with the audio and the video and why that's important. So just real quick, some tips on that. What I like to do is I'll find a video, a short clip of um, maybe somebody reading something or um, something on television or in the language that I'm trying to learn, in this case, Korean. I'll find clips of newscasts and different kinds of things that I can then look at that I can then kind of get a transcript or and write down some sentences or something that I can then keep practicing based on what I'm hearing in the video, and then videotape myself and audio tape myself, and then watch them side by side, play them side by side to see how I did. That's how I can compare myself. Another thing to do is you can read from the something from the language you're trying to learn, um, and then find an audio recording from someone else of that and compare it. Okay, so let's see. All right, so let's get into some. Wrote some notes here on some of the mispronunciations and to show you how they compare and why learning the sounds of the language is so important. And let me just, I'm seeing quick notes here. Again, when I say listen first, shut off your captions. Don't rely on captions for this part. For other parts, you need them to get familiar, but shut off the captions because you need to hear the sound yourself. You need to let your brain do its job. Um, and it can't do its job if you're relying on the captions. It creates a laziness that you think you're doing the right thing, but it's creating a laziness and it's stopping you from progressing. So, when you're doing these listening exercises, shut off the captions. You can even close your eyes and just hear the sounds. Familiarize yourself with the sounds and then go on and listen not only to the sounds but the patterns, the rhythm, the intonation. Does it go high and low? Are there inflections? Where do they emphasize? What kind of feeling are you getting when you're listening? These are all super important things. So, these ones here, with one exception, I think, no, two exceptions, are from teachers of English as a foreign language who are not native speakers. And I'll get into why it's important in a minute. Why it's important to also learn from a native speaker. Okay. So this particular teacher was saying that that this thing here really depends on this other thing over here. That's what the teacher meant to say. Really depends. Okay. That didn't take me a lot. Really depends. And it was clear, correct? This person ended up saying redepend, redepend because the person was trying to speak too fast because people think that speed equals fluency. It does not. Fluency is your ability to clearly communicate your message. So they were speaking too fast. They weren't finishing out their words. And I think they just got nervous. They know all the stuff and they just wanted to get it all out and tell you all of their important things. This person who was saying this is a phenomenal professional person, um, but you wouldn't know that because of the pronunciation. Okay, this person has science degrees and everything, but you wouldn't know that this person knows what he's talking about because redepend. isn't a word, and if you didn't have it in context, you wouldn't even be able to do the work required to put that together and figure out what it means, okay? So it's really important. Again, I'm taking these glasses off because the glare drives me crazy. Um, the second example is there's two from musicians, um, popular musicians, and one of them, the biography, I had just been introduced, to this person's music, and so I looked at the biography, and the biography said that this musician was an award-winning sing-a-song writer. So the word sing hyphen a hyphen song writer. I thought it was a a reality show. I thought she won a reality contest or something. Reading further, I realized what this artist meant to say was that she was an award-winning singer-songwriter. Now that's an entirely different thing. A singer-songwriter is a serious person, with serious skills. So, again, by misunderstanding the actual phrase and just interpreting it without looking it up. If you're hearing something a certain way, just look it up on the internet, sing a songwriter, see what you come up with. You'll get the accurate results. And, type it in different ways and look at many different sources because, again, this person thought that she was correct and that she was presenting herself in a certain way when she was actually presenting herself in another way. Luckily, her music speaks for itself, and you can clearly see that she's talented. But if she wasn't as talented, this would be a big deal. Um, and the other singer, there's the phrase I heard, this person has difficulty because the singer's native language doesn't have the L sound in it. So, and the D is different in their language. And so to have to say tangled up, the wires were tangled up behind the television or whatever, or behind the computer, tangled was problem, and then to combine it with the next word up came out as tang up. No, was it tang up? Tangu up, tangu up. That's not a word. And again, if the listener didn't have a context, they would have no idea what this person was saying. So it's important not to just guess. I mean, it's great to try and it's great to get a good start like that, but don't just guess. Look it up. If your tongue is tripping over the sound, you know that there's a problem there, so look it up, okay? And then practice it, practice it, practice it. Um, and the other one, from a singer is the phrase was sold the whatever it was, sold the whatever. So, dad sold the car to make extra money because we didn't need the second car. So sold again, the L got in the person's way, plus the D, plus the TH, which again, this person didn't have in their native language. So you can see how they compound when you don't pronounce one sound correctly and you have trouble transitioning to the next sound and then you don't pronounce that correctly and then you have another one. Not only does it completely slow you down and frustrate you, but they pile up, and so sold the came out like soda, which is like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or a soda, a carbonated drink. So you can see where this is going. Um, and then we did go through the thinking in your native language and speaking English. So just quickly, because I know I've gone a little over. So a lot of my Spanish speaking students, They have the letter V, so they recognize the letter V, but because they're thinking in Spanish, when they're saying the words that begin with V, they pronounce it as a B. So the word video, video, comes out as video, which isn't a word. We can figure it out because, based on the context, and it's not too far off. But again, when you combine these with other sounds that you're thinking in your native language and trying to pronounce in English and it's not working, those combinations just really add up. So I won't go through the rest of them because we don't have time, but you get the idea, I hope. So I just want to make just a quick thing. Again, I've mentioned about getting your information from several sources in several traditions of um, English speaking traditions. And what I mean by traditions is, you have Canada, you have the United States, you have Australia and New Zealand, and you have England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. They're all English speaking countries. So you want to get familiar with all of those different sounds so that when you hear them, your brain will say, oh, that sound is familiar to me. That sound comes from this area. So now I'm going to think in the English of that area. And that's where the fluency comes in. When you're able to fluidly move from from your culture and your way of thinking into the English culture and the English way of thinking, but also within the different cultures within the English speaking world. So fluency is all about the fluidity, your ability to transition smoothly and as effortlessly as possible. So, yeah, there we go. Um, and you also want to check, I wanted to make note that the way the different traditions of English speaking people, um, the way they spell words makes a big difference as to how you pronounce it. So for the longest time, I had no idea that the word aluminum was spelled any other way than we spell it in America. However, the first time I heard someone from was it London? It might have been London, say the word. They said aluminium. And I thought, that's crazy. How can you not even read your own language? Well, I looked up the word, and the British have a different spelling. They spell it with the I in there, aluminium. Plus, they say the U's differently in some words. And so, even in my own language, I had to get familiar with the sounds of other traditions. Um, so there you go. And the other, just real quickly before I go, I want to make sure that you understand when I'm talking about non-native English speaking teachers, okay? There's nothing wrong at all with learning from someone who isn't a native of an English speaking country, who's put in the time and learned, all that they can learn about the language. There's nothing wrong with that. And I encourage it because, in many ways, when you're learning a new language, you're focusing on the grammar, you're focusing on things that a native speaker would take for granted and might not have a name for, and might not know how to explain it to you. So people who are learning English, you're more focused on those technical aspects that, native speaking teachers might not, that we've taken it for granted for so long, and that we might not see it the way a non-native speaker would. So learning from a non-native speaker is super valuable. And again, because they've had to go through the exact same thing that you're going through right now. The thing here is that when you get to a certain point, if you're noticing that you're not progressing, that your English pronunciation isn't getting better, that maybe the level of your the complexity level, I suppose, maybe is the phrase I'm looking for, that, that you're having trouble putting together complex thoughts and ideas and communicating those in English. When you're seeing that you're stalling in your progress, that's the time to seriously think about learning from a native English speaker, because the native English speaker is going to understand, obviously, how to say things and how to, so not only just how to say it correctly, but they're going to be able to fine tune the, explain the circumstances when you would use this, that, or something else. Uh, all the cultural idioms and all the stuff that a non-native English speaking teacher wouldn't have had access to. All right. So when you decide that, or when you notice that your language is stalling, then seriously think about learning from a native English speaking teacher. Okay. And again, I have said this before. I've had students who were teachers of English in their own country, but with just a week working with me, they said, I never ever learned that in all my years of schooling in English. So, they may not know everything. They may have had whole gaps of information, critical information, missing from their education through no fault of their own, but just because of whatever their system is in their country. So, sorry. I was at the beach this weekend and I'm noticing I have such a sunburn. Anyway, there you go. I hope this was really good. I'm sorry. This is clearly a topic that not only am I passionate about, but there's so much that we can go into depth on here. So I did go over and I apologize for that, but I hope it was worth it. Um, that's my goal here, is to make this all worthwhile for you. So, all right, enough about that. We can obviously take this in further depth in other live streams. So, put your questions in the chat or put your observations. If something that I've said has triggered something for you, put it in the chat. I'm going to end this now, but put it in the comments and ask me your questions. Make your observations. What have been your experiences learning and pronouncing and all this and that? What things have you done? Put it in the comments and I will look through them and make sure to answer your questions and address what you're observing and saying. Okay, so all right, I'm super glad you could join me today, and we'll definitely see you next week at midnight, so 12 a.m. on Monday, and then again at 12 p.m. like we're doing it now, so midnight and noon on Monday. Okay, all right, we'll see you later. This was a great talk. Bye-bye.